can you believe that flying saucers actually exist? There's plenty more where that came from, so stick around for the 10 strangest airplanes to ever fly. 10. White Knight II, Scaled Composites. The White Knight II is a cargo aircraft that is designed to carry other aircraft. In essence, the WK-2 is a mothership for Spaceship Two, a suborbital spaceplane. Both planes were custom built for their primary user, Virgin Galactic. The White Knight II will carry the spacecraft to a Fedora-safe release altitude, and all the people on board the spacecraft will get to enjoy the final frontier. Well, the suborbital final frontier. As of right now, they're still in the testing phase of this massive project. I know, it sounds crazy, but we are living in the future, folks. Before we move on, let's look at the White Knight's competition, Chad, the Strato launch carrier. 9. Super Guppy, Aerospace Lines Airbus. In the 1960s, NASA needed planes to carry space rocket parts all over the place. The problem is, the stuff could get pretty big, so Airbus built this monstrosity. Fun fact, the Super Guppy is notable as the only airplane in the world capable of carrying a complete third stage of the Saturn V rocket. The Super Guppy performed this role several times during the Apollo program. 8. XF-85, McDonnell Aircraft. When an aircraft's role designation is a parasite fighter, you know things are about to get wild. Let's introduce you to the XF-85 Goblin, the prototype fighter aircraft that was supposed to protect bombers like the B-17, the B-24, and the B-29. How could such a tiny little fighter protect these big boys? Well, for one, it wouldn't have to fly unless it had to. That's right, the XF-85 would be hanging from them, or it would be stowed away inside, only to be used in case of an attack. The whole premise is a bit out there, but the US Air Force didn't have an answer for their problems at the time. As time went on, and fighter jets capable of long flights became more possible, the XF-85 was relegated to the history books. Number 7. BV-141, the Blohm & Voss. Have you ever seen a motorcycle with a sidecar? Yeah, they're pretty awesome. But did you know that there's an actual plane with a sidecar? Say hello to Blohm & Voss BV-141. It was a World War II German tactical reconnaissance aircraft. Although the Blohm & Voss BV-141 performed well, it was never ordered into full-scale production, for reasons that included the unavailability of the preferred engine and competition from other tactical reconnaissance aircraft. 6. V-173 Vought. Aptly named the Flying Pancake. This experimental test aircraft from the 1930s relied on an all-wing design, meaning the entirety of the plane had to be a wing. Judging from these pictures, seems like they succeeded, right? The Vought V-173 was not the only plane to look like a flapjack in the air. There was also the Arup S-2, the SAC AS-6, and the Vought XF-5U. And of course, the next entry on this list. Number 5. VZ-9 Avrocar Avro Aircraft. In the early years of the Cold War, the US Air Force and the Army commissioned a top-secret aircraft project, and they chose Canadian Based Avro Aircraft to design and build it. The US wanted a VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, that was very fast, efficient and deadly. Well, that was the original concept anyway. The project was scaled back immensely over the years due to design problems. Design 1 had its issues, Design 2 tried to improve on them, but ultimately the craft was unstable. It never got close to reaching the estimated maximum speed of 300 miles per hour. In reality, it could not pass 35 miles per hour due to serious instability. Funding was cut abruptly, and the project was seen as a dead end. And we never got to fly high in saucer-shaped aircraft, and because the US commissioned and paid for the whole concept, the VZ-9, 1 and 2 were transferred south of the border. The first Avrocar collected dust for over 40 years in the basement of the National Air and Space Museum. It was eventually restored and put on display. Nowadays you can find it in the Presidential Aircraft Gallery. The second design is currently under restoration at the US Army Transportation Museum in Virginia. Number 4, the CA-60 Caproni. Often referred to as the Noviplano 9-wing, the Caproni CA-60 was the prototype of a large 9-wing flying boat intended to become a transatlantic airliner. It featured 8 engines and 3 sets of triple wings. Would you ever consider getting on a plane that looked like this? It seems like something a 9-year-old dreamed up, doesn't it? Unfortunately, this plane design wasn't very successful. Its brief maiden flight took place on February 12th. Its second flight was only 2 months later, and shortly after takeoff, the aircraft crashed on the water surface and splintered into a million tiny, ridiculous pieces. Number 3. Stipper Caproni. Might as well stick around Italy for one more insane aircraft, right? The Stipper Caproni was an experimental Italian aircraft designed in 1932 by Luigi Stipper and built by Caproni. The design was weird, to say the least. In essence, the whole fuselage was a single ducted fan. Although the Italian Royal Air Force was not interested in pursuing development of the Stipper Caproni, its design influenced the development of jet propulsion. Not even 10 years after its first test flight, the Stipper Caproni design was instrumental in the manufacture of the Caproni Campini N1. The N1 first flew in 1940 and was briefly regarded as the first successful jet-powered aircraft in history, before news emerged of the German Heinkel He 178's first flight a year earlier. The A300-600ST Airbus. It feels like the A300-600ST is a boring name for such an extraordinary plane, doesn't it? Let's call it by its nickname instead, the Super Transporter Beluga. Now that's way more fitting. The A300-600ST Beluga shares many design similarities, although substantially differing in appearance to the Airbus A300 it was based upon. The wings, engines, landing gear, and the lower part of the fuselage remain identical to those used on the conventional A300, while the upper part of the fuselage forms an enormous horseshoe-shaped structure, 7.7 meters or 25 feet in diameter. In comparison with the Super Guppy, the payload was more than doubled and the volume increased by more than 30%. In November 2014, Airbus announced that it was proceeding with the development of a larger replacement based on the Airbus A330-200, 5 of which will start operating from 2019, replacing the last old Beluga in 2025. Number 1. Lund-class Ekranoplane, the USSR. The Lund-class Ekranoplane is a ground effect vehicle designed in 1975 and used by the Soviet and Russian navies from 1987 until sometime in the late 1990s. It flew using the lift generated by the ground effect of its large wings when within about 13 feet above the surface of the water. Although they might look similar to regular aircraft and have related technical characteristics, ekranoplanes, like the Lund, are not aircraft, seaplanes, hovercraft, nor hydrofoils. Rather, ground effect is a distinct technology, but it still flies, so it counts.